Good morning. It is Smooth Breakfast here on Smooth 98.1. Freshly Pressed 981 is the segment, and you're live with Valentine Ohu.
And Ayo Mairo Ese, good morning.
Good morning. And for Tuesday morning, we have a very special guest analyst in the studio. We have Folu Storms. Good morning.
Good morning, Lagos. Good morning, guys. How's everyone doing?
Very well. You
doing
could tell
great.
I was waiting to do that introduction.
Excellent.
Good
Yes.
to see you, Folu.
Good to see you too, Ayo.
And special thanks to Nnamdi Eke for stepping in this cold morning. Hello, Nnamdi.
Let's go.
Cheta Nwanze, hi. Good morning.
I'm fine, good morning.
Good morning. Cheta is at Chester Officer, Folu is at Folu Storms, Nnamdi is at Nnamdi Eke. And send me your messages.
Please send your messages to WhatsApp 0809 444 0981. On Twitter, please go to Smooth981FM. Use the hashtag FreshlyPressed981 so we can easily track your messages. And on YouTube, we're streaming live. Go on to Smooth98.1 and use the live chat option to send in your messages. Okay, so let's go on to our first story. Cheta, I'll start with you. Our first headline here is from the Vanguard newspaper. We're not truly independent. I go cap in hand to beg for fund, the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Tanko, laments. So the CJN Justice Ibrahim Mohammed on Monday warned government at various levels to allow the judiciary to enjoy its independence without undue interference, saying we will never be subservient to anybody no matter his position in the society. All right, so happy new legal year to our legal
Thanks so much.
friends,
Thanks so much.
Nnamdi and Folu Storms. So
What was that?
Cheta, please take us to this. So the second paragraph talks about the fact that this is the new year for at the Supreme Court, a new legal year of the Supreme Court, and swearing in of the SANs. In giving a speech,
Oh, is that what?
Yeah,
No.
courts just came back from vacation.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have two lawsuits and they've been stalling. So
They were on
so
holiday.
you understand why.
Sorry.
So please take us through this story. We talked about the independence of the judiciary. We know we have three arms of government.
I can start harassing my lawyers now.
You can, but after you tell us about this story, please go ahead.
It's strange that I got this story when there are lawyers in the house, but then one of them is a former lawyer. Three words here: revenue, revenue, and revenue. He who pays the piper dictates the tune, and it's funny that our esteemed Chief Justice doesn't seem to know that. The problem here, and it's not just with the judiciary, even the legislature, and the other arms that statutorily should be independent, for example, the police. The reason that there are tools in the hands of the executive, you can see this especially at state level. It's not as bad as at federal level as at state level, because everybody's eyes in Nigeria at federal level. Now you have this RMAFAC, Revenue Mobile Fiscal Allocation Commission, that is supposed to set these people's wages. But then the money at the end of the day all flows in from one source, which is the federal government, including at the states. The federal government, we run this system that is still the command-heavy system from the military days, where the federal government is the one that gets all the funds, as it were, and then shares out for people. So this feeding bottle federalism that we run, that's the effect that we see.
Yeah.
So if we want a truly independent judiciary, a truly independent legislature, what needs to happen is to decouple revenue and revenue sharing, revenue allocation from the hands of the executive at the federal level. Until we do that, until we take away the source of funding and put it in a body that really is independent, or give free people to actually make their own money. Until that is done, one of the reasons why there are certain people you cannot tell what to do is because they have their own money.
Yeah, money
All
is
of
a
us here,
critical
yeah, all
factor.
of us here were once kids of our parents. And the day you started to earn something, the day you stopped depending on daddy's pocket money, the conversation changed a bit.
Daddy or mommy's pocket money.
Not the same conversation.
All right, so I wanted to ask, because I'm really glad you mentioned, because that's the whole one of the biggest points of his speech in terms of funding. He also talks about welfare, remuneration, welfare packages for the judges after retirement. Is that something that we should be concerned about or looking? Because we know that the governors have a large payout when it comes to retirement.
Again, it's all part of that same papa born everything, because the governors, the executive controls the revenue flows. they can actually set all these things for themselves. It's politics. I think the part that I was more interested in was the Nigerian Bar Association's president, Folu Storm, who talked about the need for the judiciary to protect itself from unlawful attacks from other arms of the government. And it's very interesting. At least those conversations are beginning to happen, even though they are not yet serious about it.
I was going to say that's something that the average Nigerian should push for, because I mean, you talk about the executive and legislature, because they decide at the end of the day where fees are paid, how the laws move, and I think it always has been a glaring problem for us, for the average Nigerian, because if you don't empower the judiciary, you're going to have more and more cases where judges will collect money, and that's a difficult thing for us. So we need to understand that is our only recourse to having certain things done, is having the law work the way it should.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'll stay with you, Folu, for the next story. Briefing you publicly jeopardizes security operations, Defense Chief tells House. So the Chief of Defense Staff, General Gabriel Olunishakin, has finally come before the House of Representatives. Leader Honorable Femi Bajabiamila has asked, just talking about security situation in Nigeria, and they've said that unfortunately they would not be able to divulge in detail what their plans are for the security situation in Nigeria. Please take us through this.
Well, I mean, you have mentioned that Honorable Femi Bajabiamila is unhappy, as a number of people are, because there's a lack of information that's coming out from our security arms now. I know that previously I've sat, at these microphones and said security is it's sensitive, so having certain types of public briefings could actually jeopardize something that they're working on. However, having said that, I think that there is a level of transparency that could be present here. There's some information that should be coming out to the public. I mean, simple things like recruitment. We know that we've been engaged in protracted wars across several fronts in this country for years. That's a very long time to have your boys out there fighting. I'm sure that they're dispirited to a certain extent. I'm sure that there are issues, even with the funds that were allocated for weapons. What's happening with that? How quickly are we in the procurement? How far along are we in the procurement process? These are things that I think that General Olunishakin is doing a disservice to the general public by saying, well, we can't disclose what we're doing. There should be something that you should be able to tell us. Yes, be sensitive to the security nature of the problem, but the reality as well is, with the reports that are coming out, I mean, Cheta had been mentioning this for years anyways. We saw a spike already. It's gone back up. I was optimistic because I feel that if you have an aggressor that's forced to change tactics, it means that you're doing something and that's forcing them to change tactics. So you look at that in a slightly positive manner. However, having said that, they've gone back to full-on presses. They've gone back to, I mean, the other day there was a naval, and I also wonder how much of a blanket on press is happening with the level of detail and level of information that's coming out of the more troubled areas of Nigeria. Yes. And I think that the security is not doing enough to keep us updated, and they really should be doing a lot more.
They don't reach you.
Pardon?
They don't reach you. That's why they don't.
Well, that's also a factor, but I mean, it's concerning.
It's exactly. So it's a concern that they don't rate, and I'm sure that's why he was very upset and had to mention the fact that he'd invited them previously on Friday, and none of them failed to appear.
I will note that he had pointed out that, listen, they were having to brief the presidency, so there were other urgent matters, and they did have people show up to represent them in their stead. I always have issues when any of the houses start talking about disrespect. I'm like, listen, let's focus on what's important. This is not about your egos. This is not about whether they're respectful to you. Are you getting the information you need?
It is about their egos.
It is for them. For us, we don't care, the people. But I do appreciate that the armed forces are seeing that they are integrating their use of land and air power, perhaps there's better coordination. So I guess that's something, but the proof is in the pudding, and I'm not sure a lot of people are eating pretty good pudding right now.
Neither am I. Our next story, let's take this one from the Guardian newspaper, Nnamdi. The ICPC has started working, resumed, because they're actually being saddled with different responsibilities, one of which is currently probing constituency project, and the lawmakers are not smiling about it. They seem to be embroiled in a face-off with the executive arm of the government, alleging that the executive is the one pushing the ICPC to conduct this probe regarding constituency project. According to this headline, Senate presidency clash looms over project's probe. Your thoughts on this, please?
First of all, I'd like to say this is my first time back in the studio with Folu Storm.
Hey.
We have an anniversary going on. But before getting into this, the ICPC, they're always working, but they're a little overshadowed, I think, by the more zealous, and I'm being euphemistic, Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. What this story is about is actually a little bit saddening. So there's been the ongoing issue of constituency projects. I think most people are aware of it for a very long time now. How some special projects are taken up by particular senators and House of Reps members, to deal with what's going on in their constituency. I don't know if you can call it pet projects. I don't know how exactly to frame it. But then what's been happening is that the ICPC, according to this news story, has disclosed that there are some of these projects which have gone awry. So in some cases, you have procurement for the contracts to actually execute the constituency projects, and eventually the projects go undone. Or you have some contracts which are procured for twice and still remain undone, or maybe you have them part completed. It's a story which is not unfamiliar to a lot of Nigerians. You give somebody money for work, and at the end of the day, the work is either shoddily done or not done at all.
So why do you think the lawmakers are crying foul? Because one of the allegations they made, or rather one of the things they frowned at, was the fact that, according to them, they blame the ICPC, or they fault them for going to the press first before informing them and the House leadership. Is that how it's supposed to be?
I don't know why you need to be informed that somebody is investigating you or somebody has found out that there's some wrongdoing. In fact, it's actually in the best interest of the investigator to keep it as cool as possible.
So why do you think this makes them uncomfortable? If you're doing your work, should you be scared? Should you be worried about anything?
Generally, the Senate and the House of Reps and anybody who's politically exposed is going to feel under the spotlight when you start to make allegations about their corruption or otherwise of their practices. So I'm not surprised that they're crying sensationalism, amongst other things. I think that what is actually happening is that some of them are a little uncomfortable by the fact that once again, for the umpteenth time, they're being accused of graft and of unsavory practices, whilst they're supposed to be discharging their duties to Nigerians in, public office, right? I think that there's also the fact that there's this dual scrutiny. So further on in the story, there's a hint at the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit and its recent, would you say, announcements?
Shenanigans.
Well, I don't want to use Cheta as well, but the recent announcement that they're going to begin to look into the accounts of public officers. And then there's been a question by members of the Senate that why aren't they doing the same for members of the executive? I mean the presidency and attached offices. Why have they specifically chosen to go after the Senate and the House of Reps? But yeah, that's pretty much what it is. It's like, listen, don't put the spotlight on us. This thing is happening everywhere. This is what I think I'm hearing.
Yeah. All right, Tony De Ferrure on WhatsApp says, Cheta, how would that even work when no one wants structuring to make a headway? That's going back to the CJN's comments. Unless restructuring comes into place, then the three arms of government will still remain dependent.
Can I answer that briefly? Nigeria will restructure, whether we like it or not.
Thank you for that brief answer. So let me stay with you for the next headline. Dismissed soldiers, 88 others nabbed for murder, cultism. This Punch report also details some other criminal activities going on and what the police have been able to do to contain it. Now, 7 suspects who usually wear military uniform to rob residents of Ijegun in Lagos State have been arrested by men of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad of the State Police Command for dispossessing a motorist of his black Lexus, car. Now, beyond this particular incident, it's been in the area that some men who had been dismissed by the Nigerian army, had been going around attacking or robbing people and the police rose up to this task and have apprehended these men. Can you please take us through this story?
Well, the suspects were named. They were so it's been a problem around there. I actually saw the video yesterday. When it was published on social media, I was a bit annoyed at it, to be honest, because they are still suspects, and it's something that we need to learn in our policing. As heinous as the crimes that they may have been accused of are, suspects, the kind of slaps and then getting journalists to to essentially grill them. It's actually a human rights violation. But having said that, one of the things that we need to look at is what causes this kind of spike in crime. Now, discipline has always been a problem among demobilized troops anywhere in the world. So the issue is how you handle it. As an example, in Germany, after the First World War, incidents of crime skyrocketed. Between 1918 and 1922, there were 352 murders of politically exposed people by former soldiers. After the Second World War, there was a movement called the werewolves who tried to start that nonsense again. But very quickly, you remember that after the Second World War, Germany was split into two, East and West, so more or less. The Allies started a Marshall Plan, which got people busy in the West. While in the East, the NKVD, well, Stalin had form on keeping people silent. So the NKVD did their thing and everybody behaved themselves. In Nigeria, after the Civil War here, we demobilized a lot of soldiers. The army moved from its height of 250,000 men under arms to 80,000 men under arms within a few short years. And that demobilization coincided with the rise of violent crime. People like Ishola Oyenusi, Mighty Joe, what was his real name? Isiaka Busari and Kayode Williams. They were notorious armed robbers. All of them had been soldiers during the war. So the key difference between post-World War II Germany and post-Civil War Nigeria was the fact that Germany, but at least the victors provided these guys something to do. Nigeria, we did not. Now, think of Nigeria as a country that has been under sort of limited wars in this period. We have multiple insurgencies, Niger Delta militancy, Boko Haram. Our army is deployed all over the place, and consistently men are being demobilized from the army and being released into society with nothing to do. Not just the army, the police. Even those who are still under arms, conditions of service are poor, pay and morale are poor, and then you have a country awash with small arms. So it's not a surprise that you have people like Mike Adin doing the Offa robbery and the 3 soldiers who were dismissed this weekend by the army for kidnapping. It's a problem. And if we don't find something to give these guys to do, to keep body and soul together, it will get worse.
All right. Thank you, Cheta. On WhatsApp, Sean from Iba agrees with you. He says he loves the simple word, saying that Nigeria must be restructured. This is the solution Nigeria needs.
I didn't say must, I said will.
All right. So for next headline here from the Punch newspaper: Substandard private schools rise. Government neglects supervision. We have a detailed report done by the Punch newspaper. Detailed.
It's a bit repetitive. No, it's not an expose. I don't think this is new information. That first of all, we have a number of substandard schools that exist. Private schools. Private schools, the deplorable state of public education, and that. So essentially, what we're looking at here is a number of people, most especially the poorer end of our society, are relying more on these substandard private schools. These are schools that are being held in uncompleted buildings. So we're not even talking now about necessarily the educational quality, even though the article does go into it and says that they're employing secondary school leavers, people that have no training. There's nothing of the sort. It's just a ramshackle operation. A private businessman or perhaps a former educator has woken up and said, you know what, I'm going to have a school. Send your children here. It's 3,000 naira school fees. Now, the different states, the different education ministries at state level are trying to address it, and they say that even when they shut down some of these schools that are not quite up to scratch, the parents are still sending their children there. And I think that says a lot about our lack of trust in state-funded anything. When your populace sees those who are well-to-do in society, typically those in government themselves, who refuse to send their children to public schools, they don't want to send their children to public schools. There's again reports in this article about how the public school teachers are not committed. There's a parent, a civil servant, Mr. Ayo Mairo, who says the public school teachers have better pay, they're more qualified, but they're not as hardworking and committed as those in private school. But I mean, I think a number of people would disagree with that, because there are also others. There's a civil servant somewhere in Osun State that says you can't go and monitor, the National Union of Teachers defending their public school teachers, saying the government can't come and ask us questions because you haven't paid us. If you haven't paid us, on what grounds are you supervising us? On what grounds are you inspecting what we're doing? And I think we really need to look into that. I remember years ago, I think it was 2017, Governor El Rufai had said, you know what, as soon as his child was of age, he was going to send him to public school. And I think yesterday I retweeted
He
a
has
photograph
done so.
of him sending his son. And again, there was a lot of criticism because one, people thought at the time he mentioned it, this was showboating. And even now that he's done it, some people have said, hey, but that's not really a public school. It's one of the best public schools. Yes, but it is a public school.
This is the public school.
If we have more government officials that are focused in saying this is the direction we're going to go, you will see a following trend. You will see people coming along with that. Is really for the mass of Nigeria. It is so important and so pivotal to where we're going as a nation that we really develop our educational system. We're still here, talking about free universal basic education. Forget free. Let's have something that works first.
Quality.
Let's have quality. But our issues in the education sector are both qualitative and quantitative. From the standards of the buildings to the standards of the education, it's been in a state of crisis for a long time. And I don't know why, as a people, we're happy to fight and destroy property over things happening in faraway South Africa. But when we look at what's happening here at home, we're not willing to kick up a fuss for that. And I think that's a mark against us as a people, really.
Yes,
Yes, it is.
totally.
And back to that free education thing, universal basic education, is actually free? Because the other day we talked about how certain schools who are supposed to be under that program still pay PTA levies. Let's move on to this next story. This one is from New Telegraph. Federal government requires $3 trillion to close infrastructural gap. Seeing that the population of Nigeria for 2050 will double from now till then. Nnamdi, looking at the statistic that's given here, the story says Nigerian government would have to commit about $3 trillion into infrastructural investment through various programs, including public-private partnership, for the next 30 years to close the infrastructure gap, according to the finance minister. Your thoughts on this, please?
Well, I really do think that it's not news that Nigeria has a huge infrastructural deficit. I think that you only have to wake up, walk around the streets and see what's happening to know what's going on. Just making it very, I think this brings it closer to our imagination when you say we require $3 trillion, because everybody knows that $3 trillion is a massive amount, probably something that we can't afford. We're talking about 30 years to spend $3 trillion. We know that it's probably unlikely to happen in the current economic climate in Nigeria. But nonetheless, it's interesting, I think, that the Minister of Finance, who has just resumed office, is taking the time to look into exactly what Nigeria needs to progress. We are way behind where we need to be as a country in terms of economic progress and in terms of just, generally our infrastructural capacities. However, I do think that when she starts to talk about the two sectors which are most hard hit by weak infrastructure, energy and transportation, then you can also get a very clear idea of how things are. Transportation in Nigeria, traffic in Lagos, traffic in Abuja. I think I remember I was in Abuja last week, and Abuja used to be serene and the roads used to be extremely pilotable. We used to have the situation where, you could get home from work in 10 minutes regardless of where you were going, and now the roads are falling.
Is that different now?
I mean,
yes.
As in Abuja,
each time you land, the deterioration is obvious.
See, let me say,
Sorry,
people like why in Lagos here, people don't complain about Abuja.
No, true.
No, let's
true,
complain now.
definitely.
Yes,
Because that's shocking to hear.
My parents live just off 3rd Avenue in Gwarinpa, and you find that there's this on 3rd Avenue now, the commercialization of that street, the road keeps falling apart, especially when it starts to rain. So I understand where Zainab, what did you say?
He's just giving an
please don't
address.
All right, I'll go and find them. You won't see anything there. It's okay.
Well, thank you, Nnamdi.
But anyway, you get what I'm saying. I'm
Yes,
saying
I
that
get
she's saying that Zainab Ahmed is saying Nigeria is ahead of the West African average, but we need to improve. And they want to put in place a program which will sort of accommodate the resource deficits that she's speaking about here.
There's already a plan that was a policy document that was approved in 2014, the Nigeria's National Integration Infrastructure Master Plan. So she's saying that this is one of the documents or policies that would chart a roadmap to achieving this. So hopefully, as we all do, we hope in Nigeria. But let's move on to our next story. This time around from the Guardian newspaper, Cheta. Investors want government to remove tax investments to promote savings. Your thoughts?
Okay, Nigeria has one of the lowest saving averages around, and this is a function of the fact that discretionary income in the country is pretty poor. My organization did a survey recently, published a report. Only 37% of Nigerians of our respondents had any discretionary income to spend after spending on the essentials. If only 37% of you have any discretionary income, then you can't even be talking of saving. But having said that, another issue we have is taxation. We have all sorts of taxation. We have PwC released the reports the day before yesterday. No, sorry, over the weekend anyway. It was highlighted yesterday. We have 354 different taxes in the country. Of course, you as an individual don't have 354 taxes slammed on you, but 354 different taxes in the country. That's huge. And I can give you an example. A tax is a tax on vehicles. So, for example, if you are moving goods from Kebbi to Abuja, you will pay 11 different tolls. Those tolls are taxes. In Niger State, different local government areas, you go to pay the go. You just be paid the pay. Now, majority of our revenue comes from oil. Till now, it's made our bureaucracy very lazy. They don't attempt to look for other ways to raise revenue. And when they're forced, the only thing they can think of is all sorts of levies, which can be called taxes. That's why we have these 354. 60% of our economy is in the informal sector. The formal sector, with the new set of formal taxes that have been announced, taxes on transactions, taxes on this, taxes on that, the formal sector is likely to shrink. And burdening them with even more makes it likelier that they will shrink. We have a revenue problem. What we need to do is create incentives for the formal sector to grow. Then you can tax those extra revenues, not to shrink them, because sooner or later you have nothing left to tax.
Folu, you had an alternative view to the discretionary income.
Well, I was just going to say that I think just for the sake of wanting all my people to be rich, whatever income comes in, pay yourself first. Your taxes come after. You're more important than everything else. But I also was going to say that perhaps we should also be looking at improving financial literacy, just understanding and knowledge, and also simplifying the tax codes. Because for even the average educated person, you're not sure how many taxes you're supposed to pay. There's such complexity in the taxation system that it reads like gibberish to most people. So yeah, that can't be encouraging either. But I think beyond removing taxes, which most people try not to bother themselves with unless an officer of the law shows up at your door knocking, I think just understanding that you should be saving for yourself first and encouraging that habit, because we don't have that habit as a society. We have a balling habit. Let's floss.
Let's talking about ballers now. Let's come back to Lagos. So some people went to protested against land grabbing and people harassing them really based on their properties. But Lagos State government has decided to set up a committee on alleged land grabbing in reaction to this. Your thoughts on this, Folu?
All this committee always setting up. I had to call my father because I was informed about a name for land grabbers in Ibadan. They call them Ajagungbale. And it's actually a title that's given to these people who go around. They fight you for your land. That's actually their work. Wow. They just gauge one property. More or less. Yeah. I mean, some people call them Omonile, but the Omonile are like Ajagungbale. They come and they take it. And this has been a problem that's existed for such a long time that there's a whole name for it. So I think sitting down and setting up a committee is just paying eye service to a problem that is present. I think ensuring that your legal system works a bit more efficiently, especially when it comes to land matters. People are sat in court for upwards of 10 years, Nnamdi. Absolutely, upwards of 10 years disputing land issues.
Yeah, we were involved in a 21-year case.
21-year case.
21 years.
And I think
the length of the average land case in this country.
Exactly, it's lengthy. So I think if this was my work, going around collecting land, there's no reason why I would stop, because it's unlikely that in my lifespan or in my time that they will collect that land back from me, and possession is 9/10 of the law everywhere in the world. So I think Lagos State do a bit more
to enforce the law.
Lagos State do a bit more. Yinka says, concerning the tax issue, says, so Cheta, yes, 300 plus taxes are not slammed on us all as individuals, but they have a way of coming back to bite with individuals. Who do you think really paid that telco's NCC fine? Do you think they did? We, the consumers. And then Kolawole from BI.
Yes, thank you very much, Kolawole. We want to say special thanks to all of you who sent in messages. And thanks to our analysts who stepped in, Cheta at Chickster on Twitter, Folu at Folu Storms, Nnamdi at Nnamdi Eke. Join us next as we switch lanes to talk entertainment inside of the grapevine. Hey,
The story.
race against time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Fun times.
That's